Now let's jump right in. We are honored to have lead these discussions, licensed attorney and professional fiduciary, Darby Jones, a member of the Florida and Maryland Bar. Darby serves on a multitude of guardian, trust, and real estate committees within the bar and is a registered professional guardian. Darby, today's topic, mom broke her hip, now what? Really resonates with me. My own mother fell just 8 weeks ago and broke her foot. I sure could have used a session like this a few months ago. What can we share with our friends today to ensure they're equipped with the information to handle the what ifs of an emergency room visit?
Well, I'm very excited about today's program because I know that there is going to be a lot of information that is going to be helpful and important. So please try to have a piece of paper handy because I have a feeling you're going to want to write down some things while we're at it. And it's important for us that we're sharing provoking and helpful information for you for your journey through what we're all going through. Today, we're going to talk about an experience that most of you, if not all of you, have experienced, and that is going to an ER or possibly being admitted into a hospital, either yourself or a loved one. And sadly, it's probably inevitable for all of us that we're going to be in this situation. So just like we jump into action in preparation for hurricane season or winter snow season, we should also jump into action to prepare for the possibility of a hospital visit or an urgent ER visit. Except this preparation does involve batteries and water and bread and toilet paper. It's a very different list of to-dos. So we're going to talk about 3 phases. We're going to talk about preparation and some of the things to do in advance. Then we're going to talk about the stay in the hospital and some of the tools and tricks and things that you can do to have a better and more productive visit, and also the discharge. So let's start with the preparation of what you should be thinking about now for the inevitable visit to a hospital. It's always important to have your emergency information handy and up to date. And in Florida, and I believe most states, the emergency personnel, the 911, the EMTs, are trained to actually go to your refrigerator and look at the front of your refrigerator for information. So that is a really important place. I know it's lovely to look at that every day. You go into your refrigerator, but unfortunately, that's really something that we all have in our house. So that's the place that is really safe and secure for you to have that information. If you don't particularly want to look at it every day, you can put it inside the door. And sometimes they will go inside the refrigerator and look for that information as well. So what do you put in that information? Well, you're going to want to have your most current med list. And I don't know if that could be probably one of the most important things, and make sure it's up to date. Also, you want to include the name of your primary care doctor. You want to include a DNR, do not resuscitate. If you have one, make sure that that's included. Also, you want to have a list of those people you want to have contacted, ICE, in case of emergency. We're going to say that word several times. So ICE means in case of emergency. You also want to make a note of any allergies that you might have. If you have a pet in the home, you might want to include the phone number or contact information from someone who might be able to take care of the pet, or who your pet sitter is, or even just the vet's phone and contact information. And also, if you have your power of attorney and healthcare surrogate in place, which if you watched last month, you'll know that those are super important. And I'm sure you all went out and got that done. So have that information in that envelope if you can as well. If you have just the names and phone numbers, that's great. Make it sure it's the cell phone number. But if you can put the whole document in there, that would be even better. So now you have that on the refrigerator, which is a great, great step. Now, you also want to think about a small bag to grab, if you're able to take with you. Now, I'm not saying take, all your slippers and, makeup kit. Just take things that you might find very important when you get there. For example, maybe a phone charger for your phone, or another business card of who your important individuals are, or a copy of your driver's license, or, maybe there is a favorite pillow or some sort of comfort that you'd like to have when you're at the hospital. I would not take hearing aids. they have a tendency to sort of disappear at the hospital. So refrain from taking your hearing aids. And obviously you'd want to have those near you anyway, and not in a bag in the closet. So anyway, a small bag is really a good idea to put together if you have some items that you really would like to have with you. Now, another way to get your ice in case of emergency contacts in a safe and accessible place is to go to the DMV. Here in Florida, Department of Motor Vehicles, you can go to the website actually, and you can put on the website information about who they should contact in case of emergency. And you can have a first choice, second choice, etc. That is critically important, because that way, no matter where you are, and if you're traveling, you have a car accident, you don't have your red envelope with you with all your information, they can swipe that driver's license at the hospital and that information will come up, and it does work. I have received calls from people who have put that in that system, and it's super easy and a definite good way for people to find out if you've been hospitalized. Now, you also want to have your phone up to date. There's I'm not super technically savvy, but I'm sure every phone out there is able to have an ICE contact so that you don't have to get onto the phone with a password or anything, that they can access who your ICE contacts are. So again, and you might want to make sure they're all the same ICE people. Like the ICE people on the DMV are the same people on the phone that are in the same people that are in your little envelope, which I'm presume they should be. And also make sure that the people you have named know that they're named. So if you have your son as your healthcare surrogate, make sure he's aware of that, and make sure that he has a copy of that document. And you also want to carry this information, if possible, in your purse or on your person, so that, again, if you're traveling, or if, for example, very recently, I had a client out getting a facial and she had a medical emergency and she had her information in her purse with her. Maybe not the full document, but she had exactly who to call, who her primary care doctor is, what her chronic medications are. So it's always good to carry that with you. Another system that you can put in place is a life alert. Now, I'm just saying life alert, but there are lots of carriers that have this same system. I think we're all familiar with the I fell and I can't get up advertisements. So life alert has come a long way. It's not your grandma's life alert anymore, which is great. They're not tied to the telephone anymore. They're internet connected, so you don't have to worry about it only works at home with the phone. They come in a wristband, sort of a Fitbit looking thing. They have pendants, so they're not quite as ugly as they used to be. They also have the ability to put buttons in various places of the house. My experience is that most falls tend to happen at night in the bathroom or bedroom. People are getting up in the middle of the night. They're not necessarily fully awake. They may slip and they tend to fall in the bathroom. So you can actually put one of these buttons really low to the ground, like maybe just a foot off the wall. So in case you need to get over to that button, you can push it. So Life Alert and other companies like that have come a long way. So consider installing that system. Now, it's not without problems. I'm not going to lie. I've had a situation where a client has Life Alert. I'm the person to be called because I'm on the contact as their ICE. And you have to make sure that Life Alert has that information and has it up to date. So I get the call from Life Alert saying, hey, Ms. Smith is being transported to the hospital. Click. So you call back the 800 number and you say, hey, I just got a call. Where is she being transported to? Oh, well, we can't tell you that because of HIPAA. So like, okay, that's great. I don't know where she's going. So I had to spend a long time calling, I don't know, over a half a dozen hospitals in this area to try to figure out where she was admitted. So when you're setting up the account, try to investigate whether they're going to be willing and able to speak to the actual healthcare or the fiduciary that you've named in the system or not, and what might they need some form or box checked to let them speak to the person that's actually going to call. Another situation that I've run into, which you might have never thought about, is my mother, for example. We always knew her as Sally. Sally was her name. Turns out her real name was Margaret Lorraine. Who knew? So the problem is that when your client or your loved one, your mother, whoever you happen to be healthcare surrogate for, or if you're getting that call, if she's being taken to the hospital and you know her as Sally, for example, and you're calling the hospitals trying to find Sally or get to Sally's room, they're not going to know who you're talking about. So make sure that you know what the person's full legal name is and what it looks like on that driver's license or in that document, because that's the name that's going to be in the hospital system. I know that sounds like a pretty remote, weird thing to happen, but it does. Okay, so another thing in your preparation for a possible hospitalization is to talk to your healthcare surrogate. Now, remember last month, we talked a lot about naming a fiduciary as your healthcare surrogate and naming a fiduciary as your agent under your power of attorney. So you need to talk to them and tell them what your actual feelings are, or if you have strong opinions about medical care or the medical system, or even something as simple as, hey, you know, when I'm in the hospital, please tell them to turn off that television. Okay, I don't want to have noise, or I don't like green beans, or I don't want to have a roommate, or a little thing like that. It can go a long way when someone's uncomfortable and under a highly stressed situation. You also want to tell them about simple things like, do you have metal in your body? What are your allergies? Because some of the first questions they ask in ER is, hey, can we do a CAT scan? We don't know. Does she have metal in her body or not? And you also want to have them understand what your maybe serious end of life goals are, and to be able to be empowered to talk to the medical staff and to stand up and advocate for your position and not be, and I'm going to say not be bullied by the medical profession or talked into procedures or surgeries or things that you know that your loved one may not really want to have done. So make sure you have these conversations before the storm comes. You also want to consider, I am a professional fiduciary. I have many clients that I am responsible for. Not only as a power attorney, but as a healthcare surrogate and various other roles. I have clients all over the country. So one of the strategies I do on a regular basis is if I get that call from someone who is either being transported or being sent out from a facility or is heading to a hospital or an ER, I immediately call and have a caregiver sent to the hospital to be bedside. I do that because I need somebody there, physically there, to be able to call me, alert me, keep me updated, and make sure the paperwork is filled out correctly in case I can't get there, okay? Or to be there until I can get there. Now, if this is a surprise event, your first, you're in Chicago, your mother calls from Miami, she's on the way to the hospital. You may have to do some digging to find someone to go. But one of the first places you need to go to find somebody is the Aging Life Care Association. That is a national association. Put in the zip code on the website, and you're going to find certified care managers in the area. That's one of your first calls. If you're not able yourself to be there, you'll be able to find a care manager that can very easily satisfy your need to have someone physically at that hospital with your loved one. So now we're heading to the ER. Then the question is, well, wait a second. If I just get in the car and drive, it'll be faster than waiting for the ambulance to get here. But then on the other hand, if I arrive in an ambulance, maybe I bypass the waiting room at the ER. And truthfully, there is some logic in both sides. And I have found that, I hate to say it, that it is generally a little better to go in the ambulance and that you do get seen, it seems like, a little faster. Now, when we're talking about hospitals and ambulances, every hospital is different. Every community is different. every day is different, depending on the rush and the volume of issues that may be happening at that particular hospital or in that particular community. Coming through the COVID years, it was very difficult. This whole system was in flux. So it's hard for me to say, do this every time, because it really depends on where you live and what community you're in and how they're being staffed that day. But my recommendation is to go in an ambulance, and not try to either drive yourself or have someone drive you to the hospital. Now, once you're there, it's generally a zoo, and it's kind of crazy. So once things get settled, and once your loved one is having the lab work done, which is really very much typical, that they're going to be drawing blood, they're going to be doing a lot of lab work. It's going to take a while to get those results. Once you get your loved one settled, you're going to want to connect with the social worker. And now every hospital is a little different what they call that department. Some of them are case management. Some of them is the social working office. Some of them is the caseworker. Some of it's discharge planner. But that department is really important because they are charged with managing your stay from a distance. You may never meet the people, but it is the department that then ultimately plans the discharge. So during your stay there, if you have issues or concerns, you can reach out to that person and maybe get some solutions. It's better to reach out when you first arrive rather than just beginning that conversation at the end when they're talking about discharge. Now, the other challenge you're going to have is when we're going to have a lot of challenges. Get your paper out. Okay, there's a lot of challenges coming up. One challenge in the ER is that when you're in there and your loved one is obviously on the gurney and complaining about everything that they can complain about, you're trying to give information to the staff. You're admitting your loved one. You're telling them medication. And you have that med list. Okay, remember, have that current med list. Super important. Don't have just one copy. If you only have one copy, take a picture of it, because if you hand that original copy to somebody in the ER, it will never be found again. So keep a hold of that med list. So you're giving information, history, medical condition, what happened, et cetera, et cetera. They're taking all that information in. At some point, you're going to get moved to a floor, right? Let's assume she gets admitted. So at the floor level, the information you gave in the ER does not make it to the floor. So you need to make sure that once your loved one is actually in a room on a floor, that you repeat and make sure you read the chart. There really isn't any real chart anymore. It's all in their computer, but make sure you read that computer to make sure they have all the same information that you gave in the ER. And one of the most important pieces of that information is the med list. And this is why. I had a client one time that went to the hospital. She actually fell and broke her hip, Michelle, not her foot, but her hip. And, or we thought she broke her hip. She was in the hospital, and sometimes you don't know if they hit their head. You don't really know how serious the injury really is because you may not have seen it, right? So you have to assume the worst. So she's taken to the hospital, and she'd been to the hospital before, probably about 6 months prior, for a different issue. Well, at that time, of course, we took the med list with us. It was submitted to the hospital. There's a pharmacy at the hospital, right? It's a whole department all by itself, the pharmacy. They have the record of when that patient was there 6 months ago or whenever it was. So when that patient comes back into the ER, that populates. So her meds are right there. And very often they will go with that, whatever the meds were from her last visit. Well, lo and behold, my client ends up in about a day and a half, almost comatose, because they were going with the med list from 6 months prior, which was completely changed to a new med list. And we assumed wrongly in the ER, when we handed them the new med list, that they would have updated it and that the doctor on the floor would have caught that. Well, apparently, again, every hospital might be different, but in this instance, the doctor says, we don't check the meds. We rely on what the pharmacy enters into the system. So put this on your list as if you're a healthcare surrogate or a power of attorney, Make sure you keep an eye on that current med list. Make sure when your loved one gets to the floor that that med list matches what you have in your hand and not what the system had 6 months or a year ago. I'm not trying to scare everybody, but that's just a really important thing to do. Another thing you want to kind of keep track of is asking certain questions, because we assume that mom's in the hospital because of her broken hip or possible fracture, foot or whatever. But the truth is, it may be something very different that they discovered in the ER. So always ask, why are we being admitted? What is she being admitted for? What did the test results show? What is the diagnosis? What is actually happening? Because what we're assuming was the problem may very well not be the problem. They think you know what it is. You think you know what it is, and you're both thinking very different things. So get clarification of why you're being admitted or why your loved one is being admitted. Now, that brings me to another issue, which is very important. Is your loved one being admitted, or are they being brought in under observation? Those are two very different methods that hospitals intake a patient. It has a big impact on insurance coverage and also carrying insurance coverage for any rehab or discharge planning. So make sure you're clear on whether they're being admitted or just admitted under observation. And also the care under each one of those can be very different, and your expectations need to be different. Obviously, observation is just observation. You're not going to get as much critical care or attention as you would otherwise, having been admitted. So that's a super important issue. Now, while you're there, we're in the hospital now. We've prepared. We've been through the ER. We're up on the floor. Now you're healthcare surrogate again. You've got your mom there. You're going to make sure the chart is up to date. You're going to make sure that if you can't physically be there, have someone there. Doctors round at all different times of day and night, and you can't be there 24/7. And inevitably, when you go downstairs to the cafeteria is when the doctor will round, and you just missed them. So make sure you have a caregiver there whose sole job it is to call you the minute somebody in with a stethoscope walks in that room. And that caregiver is going to call you, put you on speaker, and you're going to be able to speak to the doctor or whomever, whatever specialist is rounding, and have that conversation stay up to date. 90% of the doctors are willing to do that. Some are saying, I'm not going to talk on a phone, don't bother me. But most doctors are really pretty good about letting you get on the phone and talking to them directly about your loved one. It's because they understand you may not really be able to be there. You may be states away and unable to be there physically. And here's the next problem. Make sure, again, that your fiduciary is willing to do the work, and that they're able to stand up to the doctors. Remember, that was part of our planning process back when you were doing your estate documents and planning for this inevitable visit. And don't have that situation where you're now in the hospital, you've been jostled through ER, you're in the room, you finally get your phone, you call your daughter, and they didn't even know they were named. They had no idea they were even named as your healthcare surrogate. So now you're already behind the gun, and your poor daughter is going to have to do a lot of catching up to be in a position to help you. So let's say the daughter finally arrives. Well, I'm not going to say finally arrives. Let's say she arrives and she's ready to go to work. She needs to make sure she understands why you're there. And every time anybody comes in to change a medication, why are they changing it? What are they changing it to? What are the side effects of that? What are we treating her for? And what is next? Because remember, when your mom or loved one gets discharged, you're going to need to understand what they've done in the hospital so that you can see whether it's working when you get home. Sometimes they give a medication as sort of an attempt to try to fix a problem, when in fact, it may very well backfire once you get home and start showing some side effects, or maybe it's not working as effectively as you had hoped. So ask those questions about what's next. What do I look for next? Once we're past this, what do I look for? How do I make my mother safer when we get home? Also, in most hospital rooms, there's a white eraser board. And you're going to want to make sure on that board that you have your name as the fiduciary, power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, and your phone number, your cell phone number. And make sure you check it every day, because sometimes when they change shifts, they come in and they'll erase everything on there. So you want to make sure, again, if you've got your caregiver there, she's going to make sure that your name and number continues to be on that whiteboard. A lot of hospitals nowadays also have portals, so you can register with the portal and keep track of what lab work is being done. The results are posted. Not that you can understand all the language, which again, is why you need to ask questions, but you can stay up to date to what is being done. So if there is a portal, I highly recommend you take advantage of that. Now, here's another issue to keep track of when anyone is at the hospital is physical therapy. And I'm going to call it PT, physical therapy. Physical therapy is probably the most important assessment upon discharge. It's also really important to get physical therapy during your hospital stay, because laying in a bed for 24 hours, day after day, can really have a serious impact on your health and your ability to recover better. So don't turn your nose up at physical therapy, and don't let your mom turn her nose up at it. So when physical therapy shows up, don't let her deny it or say, no, I don't want to do it. Make sure you get that physical therapy services and occupational therapy, OT, although physical therapy is the most important. And we're going to talk about that again when we get to the discharge part. Okay, so we're there and everybody's doing everything they should do. But then we find out that perhaps the doctor really isn't as communicative as he should be or she should be, or you're having problems with getting the nurse to really listen to what your mother's problems are. So what do you do? Where do you go? Who do you talk to? Well, remember, when you got to the ER, you reached out to the case manager or social worker or discharge planning office. That should be someone you can go to talk to and say, hey, we're here. I'm having struggles with maybe getting my mom to get this, or her legs are turning purple, or her arms about to fall off. You're not getting responses from the doctors. So case manager is where you want to start. The other route you might want to take is to start with the floor nurse. The floor nurse is the first person to go to say, hey, we're having some difficulties. She's not getting help getting to the bathroom, or she hadn't been changed yet, or whatever. Then you want to go to nurse manager if you don't get help. If you don't get help there, you want to go to the charge nurse. The person above that is the director of nursing. So there's sort of a hierarchy and a protocol to go through. And believe me, sometimes you really do need to do that. Always ask who you've talked to, get their name, make sure you remember who it is and what day it was you spoke to them, because sadly, the staff turnover is hard to track. You get admitted one day, you've got one doctor and a nurse, the next few hours, it's a different nurse. And of course, the next day it's a different nurse. So that's why the management is probably the most effective place to go to get answers to real day-to-day hands-on issues. Now, what happens if you don't have a power of attorney or healthcare surrogate and you show up in the hospital and you never did your documents? Well, how do they figure out who can speak on your behalf? And this is assuming that you're unable to make decisions. You're either in a state where you are unable to communicate, or you're about to have some surgeries and you're really not capable of making your own decisions. What do they do? What does a hospital do? In Florida, and I'm sure most states, there is a statutory priority list. And hospitals all have what's called an ethics committee. Now, again, ethics committees can be very different. If you're in Port St. Joe, Florida, the ethics committee may exist of this lawyer that we call, On the other hand, there are some well-developed ethics committees that are on staff and available 24/7, depending again on where you live, the size of the hospital, but there is an ethics committee. That committee can be convened and make decisions about who is the appropriate person to make decisions on your behalf. And in Florida, the statute will look towards your spouse. That's one of the first statutory priorities. So those of you out there who are either getting divorced or might be separated, you might want to make sure that you update your healthcare surrogate and your power of attorney so they're not looking to your spouse to be your healthcare decision maker. So unless you're absolutely divorced, it's going to be your spouse. Then they go to children and other various family members and so forth down the list until they can find someone that can speak on your behalf. Sadly, if there is no one, and this is a very sad situation, but it is an alternative, is that the hospital can arrange to perhaps have a guardianship instituted and have a guardian appointed to come in and help make decisions on your behalf. And I have served in that capacity many times. Anyone can ask for an ethics committee meeting, anybody. If you're having struggles, even if it's just an emotional situation or you've got concerns about the treatment that's being given or the staff interaction, a patient can ask for an ethics committee review, staff can, the caregiver can, family can, anyone can ask for an ethics committee to convene. There's also, of the ladder from that, we're going to talk about when there's a real problem. And I mean, there might be some acrimony or fighting going on among family members. There might be some, you might even need to have the security in the hospital involved. So there may come a point where we've got some very serious issues. I have had situations, sadly, where I have had to use this option because I will walk in the morning and my client has a black eye, or she has this huge cut on her arm, and no one has any explanation on how that happened. So that's when I pull out the risk management card. Now, risk management is when you are seriously upset and there is a serious problem. I do not use this lightly, but it is an option. If you come in and you say, look, I need to talk to your risk management officer, that's pretty much like saying, you know, I'm thinking about suing the hospital, so you might want to get somebody down here. And they take it very seriously, and they try very hard to come to a resolution of whatever is happening. So I take my hat off to them for having that at your service. Another person that can be a really big help is the chaplain. All hospitals have a chaplain. And chaplains are kind of like, they have a lot of hats and they kind of fill in a lot of ways to help. And I recently have had, and this sadly happens when you have a husband and wife, and let's say the wife is in the process of dying at the hospital, and the husband is just having a very difficult time with that, and a difficult time with making a tough decision, and a difficult time all around, with completely understandable. The chaplain is usually a fantastic tool and person who can come in and sort of help softly have that conversation with your loved one and with the family to help through these really tough decisions. So don't forget about the chaplain. So while you're there, okay, let's get on a happier note here, that we aren't having problems and your daughter's doing a great job. And what else are you supposed to be looking for while your loved one's in the hospital? I know this sounds silly, but a couple of the things that I always want to look at is the eating. Are they eating and are they pooping and peeing? And what med changes have been going on? So keep your eye on weight. You know, if you have an extended stay, you want to make sure they're weighing the patient to make sure they're not losing weight. There's some other issues about, you know, pressure points and so forth, but eating, pooping, peeing, and also remember PT, that physical therapy. Make sure that they're rounding, hopefully every day. They don't always come every day, but please keep on them to make sure they are coming. Okay, and now we're going to start thinking about discharge. Okay, your mom is recovering. She's doing very well. You've done everything to make her stay safe, and she's gotten all the services that she needed. and you've paid attention to the PT. And at the end of the day, you're going to get a PT well, to get discharged, you're going to get an evaluation from a lot of people. You're going to get an evaluation from the doctor who is primarily in charge, any specialists. You're also going to get a discharge assessment by the physical therapy department. That assessment is what's going to be the key to getting your insurance coverage with any rehab, whether you choose to go a facility or at home. And that's a conversation for another episode, by the way. In fact, let me stop here. And Michelle suggested earlier that if any of you have any subjects or topics that you would like for us to cover in Aging Academy, please let us know. Our last episode, which kind of touched on some of the estate planning and probate issues, seemed to be very interesting and popular. And so we are, this is a new initiative on behalf of the AARP. So we're very interested in bringing, like I said, thought-provoking and helpful information. So feel free to put in the chat any subjects or topics that you'd like for us to cover in the future. So let's go back to getting discharged. You've gotten your PT eval. It's great. She's going to need PT, which is always a good thing. You're in communication with the case manager. She's saying, well, where do you want her to go? Which place to pick. And we're going to talk about that in another episode. And ask questions about aftercare. And before you walk out that front door of that hospital, make sure that you have a hard copy of the care plan. They should print it out for you, read it with the nurse, make sure you understand what it's saying. Don't be bashful about asking questions. It's not a time to be embarrassed about not knowing what some of these medical terms are, but read that care plan very carefully. Also, if you're being given some new prescriptions, see if they can actually give you the prescriptions right then and there. If not, make sure you have the hard copy of the prescriptions as well. They'll say, oh, we're going to call it in, but don't rely on that. Get a hard copy of the prescriptions because you may be getting discharged on a Sunday morning at 7 o'clock, and good luck getting prescriptions filled at that time. So try not to leave until you feel comfortable that you have everything in order. If at all possible, in fact, don't get discharged on a weekend. If you can possibly postpone your discharge to a weekday, that's far better because weekend staff, any nurses out there, I apologize, but weekends are usually a tough time to be, the staff is usually or can be agency staff, which means they're not actually employees of that hospital. They're sort of filling in for weekends and those shifts that aren't too popular. So I highly recommend any transfers from any facility to any facility, try not to do it on a weekend. And also make sure that when you get home or when you're leaving, you make sure you understand all the medications, because one of the most common causes for readmission into the hospital is medicine mismanagement. So you're going to get home and here's mom's big pile of medicine that she was taking before. And now you're going to come walking in with a brand new pile of medicine. You're going to make sure you get those things clarified and cleaned up. As a healthcare surrogate, that would definitely be your job. Now, back to understanding why somebody's in the hospital. I had a client that recently went in the hospital. She was having a facial, clammy, sweaty, feeling nauseated, took her to the ER. She was admitted. She had a cath procedure, pretty simple procedure. They went in to look to see if she needed, it was a cardiac issue. Well, it turns out that unbeknownst to us or anyone that was there, she went to her follow-up appointment, which is a very important thing to do, to go to your follow-up appointments after a hospital visit. And at the follow-up, the cardiologist said, well, she has a UTI. So really, we had no idea. No one in the hospital mentioned anything about a UTI. We were all focused on this cardiac issue. So the follow-up appointments, while some of us may want to blow off going to the doctor, it really is important, especially after a hospital visit. Now, lastly, I want to leave some time here. I know I've kind of gone over a little bit, but I want to leave some time for questions. I hope we've had a lot of good ones. But I did want to mention an article that I read recently from Kiplinger, and it's called "Why an Entourage is a Key Investment for Retirement." And there's a link in it, the link to this article in the chat, and it is excellent. And so this is your homework for next month, is to read that article. One of the quotes in it says, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a small town to support an aging adult. There are different people that come in and out of your life. Estate planning should include longevity planning not only for the people you will need, like fiduciaries, power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, care managers, but also the services that you're going to need to survive and thrive. So I hope that I've given you lots of great information. I think we're ready to open up to questions if anybody has any. And Michelle, I know you've had a recent experience. I hope I've shared some information that was helpful for you.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's been a learning experience with mom. And so hopefully it never happens again. But if it does, I feel like I'm in a much better position and I'm equipped with the information and some great resources to make sure that we are prepared for when she goes into the hospital, while she's there, what questions are pertinent to ask, especially as they're discharging her, and what information we need to know when she comes out. And so I hope that it was equally as valuable and useful information for everyone else. There were, I think I had at least one question that I wrote down. Rochelle had asked, how does a professional fiduciary get paid for taking care of events like ER visits? So how does that whole process work?
Well, that's an excellent question. Professional fiduciaries like myself, I charge by the hour. And so do certified care managers. In fact, so do caregivers. It's an hourly sort of service. It varies depending, again, on the community you're in and the expertise of the person you're hiring. But it's generally an hourly charge. Obviously, I'm probably more expensive than a caregiver, which is why I kind of like to send the caregiver to the hospital rather than me going personally, because it'll say it's more economical. And I'm able to train the caregivers to know exactly what I need and how to ask those questions and deploy them safely for the client. I hope that answers your question.
It does. So I didn't see any other questions related to the subject matter. I think the number one question that I've been seeing in the chat is this recorded? How do I copy the chat? And I don't know if I messed something up on my end as I was setting this up, but I understand people are having a hard time copying the chat. And my guess is people want to copy the chat because we've shared some great resources in there. Have no fear. All of these links and resources are going to be included in a post-event email that's going to get sent out a little bit later today. So you'll have access to all of that. And best of all, you're going to get a copy of this recording. Now, the recording is going to take a little bit of time because we do a little bit of editing on our end. But once that's available, it's going to be on the AARP Florida YouTube page. In fact, the January session, What is a Fiduciary, has already been posted. If you missed that or just want a refresher, feel free to check that out. I'll make sure that link, I'm going to put that in the chat again. But then also, I'll make sure that an email goes out to you once that this particular session is recorded and posted to YouTube as well.
And next month, I know, Michelle, you're going to talk about next month, but next month we're going to carry it a little further along here and talk about being admitted into one of those places. We're going to talk about facilities, the variety of kinds of facilities, how to really pick one, and some of the practical tips about making those decisions. So that'll be a fun one too.
Definitely. And so March is already planned out, as Darby just mentioned, and I'll make sure that you also get a link to register for that. And we're working on pulling together the second quarter, so April, May, June, and we're really looking to you. We want to make sure that we're providing you with the most relevant information that is going to meet your needs today and tomorrow. So if you have ideas about different topics that you want us to talk about, please feel free to share that in the chat. We're also going in that email, and this is an important part, there's going to be a hyperlink to a survey. It is very important that we get as many people to complete that survey as possible so that we can share with AARP leadership just how wonderful and beneficial this information is so that we can continue to have this offering for AARP members and friends all across. So help us get the word out, share with everyone. It's absolutely, this is a free resource and you do not need to be an AARP member. So feel free to register yourself, register guests, tell your friends about it, and fill out that survey and check out those wonderful resources as well.
Now, can I just mention a couple
Yes.
of things? I'm scanning through the chat here, and someone asked about how do you get that license information if you don't have a driver's license. And I would recommend just getting a state ID. You can go to the DMV and get a state ID, and it can have the same information on there. So I hope that answers that question. And also, I want another little, we probably should put this in as a resource too, but physical therapy is super important. When you get back home, you're going to have it ordered for however long. But let's say you've expired that need but you just want to keep your range of motion and sort of movement together. And maybe you're not really ready for a physical therapist, but you just need someone to help you move, walk, and safely get around and keep that mobility. There are companies that do what they call in-home senior fitness. It's almost like a little personal trainer, and they customize it to what you need and what your needs are. You don't need a prescription. You don't need a doctor's order. It's a private, you can hire someone once a week, twice a week to come and just help you with mobility.
Fantastic. So I got so this question actually came up a couple different times, is getting a caregiver at home sounds like a wonderful idea. Where do I go to find out how much it costs and find help paying for it? So that may be a whole nother topic to discuss.
Well,
but if you have any quick resources to share.
Yes, I do. In fact, don't get one off that advertises on television, number one. You want to get, if you can, get a local company, a local management, local owner. You want a licensed agency. It's very dangerous to hire privately the girl next door or this group that used to take care of this lady down the street, because you're putting yourself at risk, because you're not paying Social Security, you're not paying FICA, you're not doing a background check, you're not doing making sure they have a valid driver's license, all the things that are exposing you to big liabilities. Always hire someone through, hopefully, a local agency. Now, hiring caregivers is an art. They may send someone that you really don't like, and that's okay. They may talk too much, or maybe they don't talk enough, or maybe they have cologne that you don't like. So, and it's perfectly fine to keep working with the agency until you get a team or a group of people that you like and can get along with. They're coming into your home and they want you to be happy. Believe me, that's their job. So I hope that helps, but don't hire independent caregivers. Don't hire from like a place for home mom or whatever it's called, or you want an agency where they have a team environment. They're employees of that company, not independent contractors. We can talk a lot more about that in another episode.
I love that. I've jotted that in my notes for a possible future session. So I'm getting lots of great feedback, Darby. Great, valuable information. Thank you so much for sharing your time and wisdom with us today. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. Now, again, if you didn't take notes, that's okay. You're going to receive an email from me later that has all of the resources, a link to register for our next session, Thursday, March 21st. We hope that you'll join us as we explore residential long-term care options. Nursing homes aren't the only option, nor are they nearly as scary as you may think. So we've included a link in the chat to the Aging Academy Navigating Change calendar. Pre-register for these events so that way you get a reminder email as well as a link to join us live. Until then, consider joining us for other fun and informational virtual events by visiting the AARP Virtual Community Center. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.